And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. The first King's speech for over 70 years. Rishi Sunak's first. Will it be his last? Has he done enough to convince voters that he really is the agent for change? And forget about me being debanked. We're going to uncover the true NatWest scandal, how this is costing us, the taxpayer, tens of billions of pounds, as the bosses have walked away with over 50 million quid. And Italy strikes a deal with Albania to send 36,000 people that cross the Mediterranean straight to Albania for processing. Could we learn a figure or two from Italy, or will the ECHR intervene there as well? All of that, but first, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you and good evening to you. Well, the Labour leader has criticised the first King's speech to Parliament in 70 years by saying the only fight left in the government is the fight for their own skin. Earlier, King Charles outlined the Prime Minister's legislative agenda for the year ahead amid traditional pomp and pageantry. The speech included measures on tougher sentencing for murderers and a ban on leaseholds for new houses in England and Wales. Sir Keir Starmer said the Conservatives were severing Britain's future, but Rishi Sunak responded by saying the new measures would change the country for the better. Now, the government says it'll carefully consider any application by police to prevent protests planned for Remembrance Weekend. The Metropolitan Police is asking organisers to urgently reconsider demonstrations planned in London for the weekend because of their assessment of the risk of violence escalating. But the pro-Palestinian coalition are refusing to cancel the march. Police could request that it's banned if there's a threat of serious public disorder. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister said he doesn't think it's right for the protest to be scheduled on Armistice Day. Meanwhile, senior government figures have been holding an emergency Cobra meeting in Downing Street today to discuss the impact of the Israel-Hamas conflict on the UK. Today marks a month since the October the 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel. Hundreds of people gathering outside Downing Street earlier as London joined major cities around the world in holding a memorial vigil for those who've died in the conflict. Wales's First Minister says WhatsApp messages between Welsh Government officials relating to the pandemic may have been deleted. Mark Drakeford was answering questions after messages on the platform between ministers at Westminster emerged at the COVID inquiry. There's been controversy in Scotland too, with messages belonging to the former First Minister there, Nicola Sturgeon, also apparently deleted. Mr Drakeford said he didn't know how to use the platform. And lastly, a teenager has been arrested after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed near a school in Leeds this afternoon. The teenager's been taken to hospital in a critical condition following the assault in Horsforth this afternoon. The head teacher of Horsforth School says the boy who was attacked is a former pupil. Police cordons remain in place in the area. And more arrests are expected in Edinburgh after disorder on bonfire night injured 9 emergency service workers. Fireworks and petrol bombs were thrown at police and firefighters amid clashes with young people on Sunday. The Scottish Government says 21 crimes were committed in what they've described as totally despicable violence. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Well, the state opening of Parliament really is a magnificent thing. And there was the King sitting on the throne, wearing his crown, delivering the speech. Here is how he began.
It is mindful of a legacy of service and devotion to this country set by my beloved mother, the late Queen, that I deliver this, the first King's speech in over 70 years. The impact of COVID and the war in Ukraine have created significant long-term challenges for the United Kingdom. That is why my government's priority is to make the difficult but necessary long-term decisions to change this country for the better.
Well, that was his first King's speech, but will it be Rishi Sunak's last King's speech is a big question. Here was the Prime Minister later on this afternoon in the House of Commons.
Now, Mr. Speaker, this King's speech builds on the strong foundation of economy well on its way to recovery. It rejects big government and instead backs people and businesses to thrive. It strengthens society with historic measures to support the nation's health and education. It secures our streets and borders with tougher sentences for criminals and powers for police. And above all, this King's speech delivers change. Change in our economy, change in our society, change in our communities. It takes long-term decisions for a brighter future, and I commend it to this House.
Well, there you are. After 13 and a half years in power, they are the party of change. And Keir Starmer went very much on the attack against the Home Secretary.
We have a party so devoid of leadership, it is happy to follow a Home Secretary who describes homelessness as a lifestyle choice. And believes that the job of protecting us all from extremists, the most basic job of government, is legitimate terrain for her divisive brand of politics. Mr. Speaker, as Director of Public Prosecutions, I worked closely with the police and counter-terrorism forces. Their job is hard enough already, without the Home Secretary using it as a platform for her own ambitions. So I say to the Prime Minister, think very carefully about what she is committing your government to do. And think very carefully about the consequences of putting greater demands on public servants at the coalface of keeping us safe. Because without a serious Home Secretary, there can be no serious government, and he cannot be a serious Prime Minister.
Funny thing is, all the things Suella says actually have majority public support in the country, but hey-ho. Now, I think what today was the firing gun for the next general election, and I'm joined by GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope. Chris, that's what it's all about, isn't it? These 21 bills that were laid out, it's all about this is what we're going to fight the general election on.
No question. A quarter of them about law and order. You saw there Suella Braverman sitting right next to the PM, Rishi Sunak in the House of Commons. That's for a reason. You know how these visuals work, these image makers work. She's there because they know they've got a story to tell. Reported crime is down at record lows, Nigel, according to the ONS.
That's because we've given up reporting crime, in my view, but
okay,
go on,
well,
Chris,
there we
go
are.
on.
OK, but the ONS figures are good for the government. They want to try and stress the point that you might come on to some areas around the edges, but they are saying life means life in the most serious cases. And their sentencing bill, the criminal justice bill, new powers to tackle complex crime, force criminals to hear their sentence. I think it's quite, it might work. I think there's 21 bills. For me, that gives you a timetable towards next election. And for me, that means he's going very long indeed. Possibly, I think, the first time until January 2025.
Well,
I think he's going the full distance.
Constitutionally as far as they can go.
That's right. Late January 2025. I think he's going down those stairs every single day. Number 10 Downing Street, Nigel, you haven't been there yet, have you? But when you do go there eventually in your long political career, even your career at GB News, as you climb those stairs, all those PMs look down at you with their dates below. Now, when you are Rishi Sunak, if you're so far behind in the polls, I'm just going to guess this, but if you're looking at those dates, he wants his dates to be as long as possible.
Interesting. Now, the problem he's got, I think, is change, change, change. We saw at the end of that clip. He is the agent of change. After 13 and a half years, how on earth can they even begin to expect anyone's going to believe that?
You know as well as I do, the Tory party changed its leader every 3 years. It's like a snake that changes its skin.
Well, sometimes 3 times in 1 year.
Indeed, but over the piece, over the past 13 years, on average 5 leaders. It's changing its skin like a snake, and that allows it to reshape its appeal to the electorate. Labour is not as able to change leader as quickly, and that's why it's often stuck behind that.
They did change in 2019 from being deeply reluctant at the leadership about Brexit into being gung-ho for Brexit and won an 80-seat majority. Surprise, surprise. But I don't see where the change is here. Other than saying we're going to get a bit tougher on law and order and ban smoking, where's the change?
Yeah, well, there's some interesting measures in there. On Brexit, maybe they've got a deal to do more trade arrangements with Japan, Peru, Malaysia, Brunei. They're banning the exports of live animal exports. It's round the edges. I mean,
new. None of it's new.
The Brexit campaign that you fought and you won in 2016, many will still say, why isn't this government gripping those opportunities that were laid out there by you?
And for Keir Starmer, as you say, a big attack on the Home Secretary. You kind of feel that Starmer just feels with a 20-point lead, all he has to do is play it safe.
Well, quite, but that's damaging, of course. I mean, he is not over the line yet on having agreement on his Gaza position. Rumours about the SNP could use an Opposition Day debate next week to force a vote on whether a ceasefire or not. Yeah. The Tories happy with that. SNP very happy. Labour not so. And MPs they'll have a problem putting their name against things which their electorate will see. I think, though, the Suella Braverman, going back to her, the issue she retweeted a worded tweet at the weekend about lifestyle choices and tents for homeless people. That's because the vagrancy bill as was in the housing department, now in Home now is attached to this big criminal justice bill, and that's why it's her problem. I think some of it may come in because there is measures in there to try and tackle aggressive begging.
Did you feel, as they filed out, that there was a mood of optimism, slightly more optimism amongst Tory MPs?
It's a two-part play, this. You're in a two-part play. The first part is this, nothing is surprising today. The second part is the 22nd of November, when you're going to have the autumn statement. Will he being the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, have any space for tax cuts, show any leg on where he's going with tax cuts? By the way, the following day, provisional date, is the migration stats for last year.
Wow.
So that's a big week in politics.
No, it is a big week. Well, we'll have to see whether the uninspiring Chancellor can inspire. Chris Hope, thank you. Well, let me tell you what really got me down about this King's speech. Life means life. Let's see Rishi saying it.
Tougher sentences for rapists and sex offenders, something that the party opposite voted against, Mr. Speaker. And for the worst offenders, life finally means life. All while the Leader of the Opposition in the front bench...
Well, there we are. You see, life means life. Now, ever since the death penalty was abolished in the late 1960s, and we were told then we can get rid of the death penalty because those that commit murder will serve a full life sentence in prison, except they didn't. So in 1983, Margaret Thatcher stood up and said, in future, life means life. And then John Major, as Prime Minister, in the mid-90s, stood up and said, life means life. Then David Cameron said, the most heinous offences, life will mean life. Theresa May proposed measures to ensure that life sentences meant life for those who committed the most serious terrorist offences. And Boris Johnson promised that those convicted of violent crimes, such as child murder, should receive life means life sentences. They've been saying it over and over, and they're saying it because they want you to think they're going to get tough on law and order. And yet, what was included in today's King's speech was the fact that 30,000 criminals will now avoid jail every single year. Yes, that's right. 30,000 people with convictions will avoid jail. We're not going to send anybody to jail who gets a sentence of less than 1 year, unless it is in some way violent or sexual, in which case, actually, the sentence would be more than a year anyway. It is, frankly, a shoplifter's charter. And for those that understand crime and how it works, whether it gets reported or not, you know, the broken windows theory that was put into place in New York said the way you have lots and lots of little pieces of small crime, actually the whole area gets worse and leads to more violent crime. The idea somehow that we can promise life means life without ever really intending to deliver it, whilst at the same time saying that 30,000 people a year will not go to prison. Sorry, doesn't fly with me. Let me know what you think. Does this get your vote? Farage@gbnews.com. Chris Hope, you see my point.
Yeah, you make a good point. They know this. In the documents attached to the King's Speech, they say they are grasping the nettle. They're legislating for a presumption to suspend sentences of less than 12 months. If you offend again in that period, you're in jail, because the problem is there's no jail space left. To his credit, you're right to say all those points, Nigel Farage, but to his credit, he is trying to recognise that what is happening, you can't jail everyone anymore because there's no jail space.
Right, and therefore, what happens is we live in a less safe society, a society in which we're more fearful to walk down the street.
Reported crime is down, Nigel. Look at the figures.
I insist, we don't even bother to report crime.
Even on the crime survey, even on perception of crime, that's down too.
Well, if crime's down, why are the prisons full? I mean, that's for the Home Office to answer, not you, but I accept that. But I just don't buy the narrative. And, I mean, take London. Take London. There is no doubt there has been a serious deterioration of law and order in London in a very major way. And it isn't just knife crime in the poorer suburbs. You know, it's Kensington and Chelsea and people having their watches stolen. And I'm told there's a similar pattern in Birmingham, Liverpool and elsewhere. I'm not impressed by this. And I don't think the backbenchers are going to like this either.
Is it bravery, though? Is he not being brave? The term used in a government document is we're grasping the nettle. We're passing a law to deal with this.
We're grasping the nettle.
It's been dodged for PMs
go out
and leaders.
And shoplift, guys, and we won't do anything to you. I don't buy it. Chris Hope, thank you very much indeed. Well, in a moment, we'll get a Conservative voice and a Labour voice on today's King's Speech.
We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Ah!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, some of your rather mixed reactions, shall we say, to the King's speech. Alison says, great speech with no substance. Colin says, the King's speech was a waste of time and money. No one believes Sunak. No one believes Starmer. No one believes a word that sitting MPs say anymore. The trust is gone for good. Colin, let me promise you, old son, you are not on your own right at the moment. And another anonymously says, what speech? I forgot about it already. Now, to discuss the King's speech, I'm joined by James Daly, Conservative Member of Parliament for Bury North, and Paul Richards, lifelong Labour activist and former advisor to 2 Labour cabinet ministers. James Daly, let's think about this. A regulator's been brought in for football.
Because of Bury Football Club now.
There's a smoking ban coming in, and property rights for people who own leasehold properties or rent properties are being restricted. I would say this was a pretty good Labour budget. As opposed to, I mean, no, this is what I would expect. I mean, honestly, I would expect, after the first King's speech, a Labour Chancellor to put these sort of things before the House.
Nigel, can I just say in terms of the Bury thing, because Bury was actually mentioned in the King's speech.
Yep.
The football regulator was brought in because of what happened to Bury Football Club in my constituency. I've secured £1 million to save one of the oldest football stadiums in the country, which benefits thousands of people in my
constituency. And we came to your constituency and we covered this.
And we talked about that.
Absolutely.
So it's an important thing, Nigel. It affects thousands of people.
No, I get
so
that.
I don't think we should criticise.
But I mean, the idea of big state regulators, we think of normally as being more of a Labour thing than a Conservative thing, don't we?
Well, when you've had the postbag that I've had with hundreds, if not thousands of people who've had something taken from their lives, which is very important to the social heartbeat and the economic heartbeat of a town in the north of England, I think it's a good move. I think it's something that was needed. I think we could talk about football forever. There's some other big things.
And smoking bans, property rights restricted.
Well, you know, property rights, no-fault divorces, no-fault evictions, forgive me, in respect to that. So I think there's some merits in some of the things that are doing. We are the party of private, we are the party of private industry, of entrepreneurialism, and I don't see anything in these measures that challenge that, Nigel.
No.
And I speak to that as one of those dastardly MPs who actually has a second job. I actually work and have a firm of solicitors as well as being an MP, and people who watch this may disagree with that. So I do actually know what employing people is.
I personally have no problem with that. Yep. You know, if you're working 60, 70 hours a week, you can do both jobs.
Yep.
Fine. Quick thought, James, before I go to Paul. Change, change, change. That was the big Sunak message. This isn't really a King's speech for change, is it?
Nigel, I spend a lot of my time knocking on doors. I get thousands of surveys sent back to me on all various things. And do you know what the recurring theme is? Yes, there's some real big issues and some really big questions about the Conservative government at this moment in time. But do you know what we don't get? When those voting intentions, you've knocked enough doors in your time.
I sure have.
No changes from Conservative to Labour. There are issues regarding, should we say, on the right of politics and people that there are no changes. So in the real world, away from Westminster, there is not that change now. Sometimes you want to encourage people to believe there is.
Look, he's not talking about change of voting patterns. He's saying we are the government of change. And Paul, all that Keir Starmer has to do really is just sort of play with a straight bat, really, isn't it?
Well, do you remember Ted Heath going to the country with that slogan, "Who governs?" back in the 70s? And the danger with asking that kind of rhetorical question is you might not get the answer you want. So Rishi Sunak going into an election saying, do you want change? I think people do want change, but they don't think it's him.
It's quite risky, isn't it?
He's asking the wrong question, I think, and that's the real danger. He had one job with this King's speech, and that was to reboot the government after the disastrous conference that they had. And I think in its own terms it's failed.
We don't really know what Labour stand for, but point of my first question, really, Paul, was maybe we don't need to. Maybe a lot of the Labour vote is, you know, we don't really like the Tories, the SNP vote falling in Scotland. It's kind of falling into your lap in some ways.
Well, the danger is this sort of one more heave, you know, sleepwalking into victory and all that. And the real danger is, of course, as I remember from the 92 election, that gets snatched from you at the last minute. Yeah. So actually, I think the people around Starmer, the people who've won elections that are advising him, like Peter Mandelson and so on, they know full well you cannot just rest on your laurels. I mean, I think we will see a lot more meat on the bones over the next few months, more speeches, more pamphlets, more books, just things setting out the Labour agenda in more detail, because we know we can't take it for granted. That would be a disaster.
No, I wonder in many areas, actually, whether the Labour agenda is not that dissimilar from the Conservatives.
I think there are differences.
Differences, but not huge, not big philosophical differences.
I don't think we're going to undermine capitalism, you know, as the previous Labour incarnation wanted to. I think we're pretty strong on things like NATO, national security, defence and so on. Those big issues, I think probably there is some agreement. You can see that certainly as the way the Middle East issue is being played out across both benches. But on the sort of questions of living standards, growth in the economy, genuine levelling up, the National Health Service, schools, roads, rail, hospitals, all those things, I think there are genuine differences.
I wonder whether the big problem, perhaps, that Starmer and the Labour Party face, we talked a moment ago with Chris Hope about the fact that the SNP are going to try and get a vote in the House of Commons next week on whether there should be a ceasefire in Palestine. Clearly, many Labour MPs would vote for that. Maybe a handful, but not much more than a handful of Conservatives at this stage would vote for that. We've seen 10 councillors in Burnley resign. Rumblings of maybe a George Galloway, maybe a Jeremy Corbyn running for Mayor of London, putting up candidates. This could split the Labour vote in the big cities.
I don't think so, because I think it's an issue that is of passionate intensity on the margins, and some of us are very concerned about the issue. But most people, it's one of those stories in the news going on in the background, and they're more concerned about their wages and their hospitals.
Of course they are.
I don't think it's going to be a dominant issue.
In the East End of London, in Yorkshire towns, in parts of the
that's
Northwest.
true.
You know, I mean, you could well find that there is, you know, a new semi-Islamic style.
But we had that after the Iraq war, and Labour went on to win that election with the majority, you'll recall. So, yes, there were some ructions in some parts of the country, and I understand there are these huge passions that are you know, roused by this issue in the Middle East. But it's not the big issue that's affecting everyone at the next election. It's going to be about living standards, the economy, the old stuff.
Directly, I get that. And, James, you know, you're from a part of the country that has got quite a substantial Muslim population in some of those towns and cities, and of course quite a big Jewish population around the greater Manchester area too. How have you seen this playing out on the ground?
I think it's important that we recognise that this is a really important issue to many thousands of people in this country. We recognise that people should have the right to march peacefully and to put forward any message that they want to put forward.
On Armistice Day?
Absolutely not. I mean, I've seen, and I think you may well be discussing this later, I've seen Mark Rowley, it appears, and I've not had this confirmed, it's over social media, that he is saying to the government that there is no reason to ban the march on Armistice Day, which is a bit strange, Nigel, because I was seeing other messages coming out from the Metropolitan Police asking the organisers not to go ahead with the march.
Well, begging them,
because of the risk of disorder coming from it.
But in your part of the world, on the ground, do you see the tensions that are there?
I think there are, yes, I think there are definite tensions, but we should recognise tensions and manage those tensions and understand that they are genuinely held views, and that we should use language that reflects the various views within our communities, but making sure that our communities are united together, and that this never, ever turns into anything other than peaceful protests and political disagreement. There's more that unites us than...
And one of the biggest Labour figures in the country, of course, is Sadiq Khan. Normally very outspoken on many issues, seems to be terribly quiet over this march on Armistice Day.
I mean, I think we need to be able to speak out on this, because I would disagree with the march going ahead, and I would appeal to the organisers to say, look, there's one day when the nation comes together, which is Armistice Day. We do something that is collective, and we do it in every town and every village throughout the United Kingdom. There is no need to have this demo on this day. It's provocative.
No, and they've had the last 3 Saturdays.
Yeah, I was there on one of them as an observer, and, you know, it's a big demo. I felt not particularly safe walking walking through the crowd. A lot of people there, you know, with...
Was it that unpleasant?
It's very unpleasant. And, I mean, you're saying about any message should be allowed, but, you know, the anti-Semitic messaging should not be allowed, and that's against the law. And I think Rowley needs to do a bit more about the arrests that he's saying he can't make.
Oh, no, I agree with that totally. Back to the King's speech, just to sort of sum up. Paul, do you feel that Rishi Sunak has made an impact today?
No, well, I think the only impact will be on his own backbenchers who are going, well, is that it? And are you really the right guy to lead us into the next election? I think it's made more trouble for him than it was worth.
And James, Paul does raise an interesting point. You know, you can get an answer to a question that you don't really want. Is he right to say that we are the party of change after 13 and a half years?
I think he's right in terms of being a Prime Minister that's come in partway through a term and has got a vision for the country that he's legislating in terms of doing. I just want to make this point, Nigel. The media narrative, and I'm sure you don't buy into this, but people on the ground do not like Keir Starmer. They are not enthused by him. He has no policies. He has no... what is it that we're getting with Keir Starmer?
Well, I don't think they... I would agree they're not enthused by him, but I wouldn't say they don't like him.
It's not a dating show, is it? We're not trying to do who we're going to go for a drink with. It's about who's going to run the country well.
Actually, that does help. It does help.
Paul, if you want to go on the basis that politicians can be disliked but also get elected, I think that's a rather strange sort of political viewpoint to come to. Rishi Sunak is liked. He has a strong view for where this country should go in the future, and he's legislating for that.
A lot of people think he's a little bit out of touch, though.
Well, I don't know. I have to say, I think Rishi is very out of touch. I think Keir is pretty uninspiring, but I can't find anything I dislike about him. So he's sort of pretty neutral for me. In fact, Rishi, I think, is a very nice bloke and very intelligent. Probably the most intelligent Prime Minister in IQ terms for a long time.
Which is not a bad thing for Prime Minister, is it?
He wants us all to do maths until we're 18 and play chess. Gentlemen, we'll find out.
An intelligent man, full of principle, Nigel. That's what we need to back.
As things go on, we'll find out how the cards fall. In a moment, we'll talk about the poppy attack on the poppy seller, a violent attack on the man up in Edinburgh. We'll also look at this statement that's just come out from Sir Mark Rowley saying that actually the march on Saturday, on Armistice Day, hasn't yet met the threshold at which the Met say it should not go ahead. Is this yet more cowardice from the Met? All of that in a couple of minutes.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows...
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer, and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle. Could you be quiet? What is this?
It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
So the Cobra Committee met this afternoon, as it always does at times of worries about security. Following the meeting, Samat Rowley, the boss of the Metropolitan Police, in the last few minutes had this to say.
The remembrance events will not be disturbed. Whatever protests and events go on, we will do our utmost to protect those because they are so critical. People shouldn't be in fear that those are going to be compromised. We will do everything possible to make sure they're not. The second point about protest, though, there will be a protest this weekend. Parliament's very clear about that. The law provides no mechanism to ban a gathering, a static protest, a rally, anything like that. There's no mechanism whatsoever to ban such a thing. And if the organisers want that, then it will happen. At the moment, as the organisers are still putting the final stages to their plans, which, to be fair to them, are somewhere away from the ceremonial footprint here in Whitehall, they're putting the final touches to those. We're looking alongside that at what conditions we might need to do to reinforce the protection of critical events and of Jewish communities and the like. If over the next few days the intelligence evolves further and we get to such a high threshold, and it's only been done once in a decade, where we need to say to the Home Secretary we think it's got to the stage to ban the march element, then of course we will do. But that's the last resort that we haven't reached yet.
Well, he says we haven't reached that threshold yet, but I'm still making the point that they've marched for the last 3 Saturdays in a row, and this is a very special day in our national calendar, a solemn day of remembrance. But these people who now live in our country simply don't seem to care about this. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you one very good reason why I think this should not go ahead this weekend, and it's because of what happened in Edinburgh over the weekend. And I'm joined now by Tony Maguire, GB News' Scotland reporter. And I believe, Tony, you're outside Waverley Station, and we're going to discuss the case of Jim Henderson, aged 78.
Yes, that's good, right. Good evening, Nigel. I'm here in Edinburgh, outside Waverley Station, and I think what happened here, it was a few days ago now, on Saturday. I think everybody's actually still in shock. You know, it was such a horrific situation for a veteran. Jim Henderson, he served in the Royal Corps of Signals, the 32 Signal Regiment. He served with the Army in Northern Ireland, and over the past few Novembers, he's been part of the furniture here at Waverley, collecting money from the Poppy Appeal. And on Saturday, one of 8 or more protests all around Scotland descended from the Mound into Waverley Station here and encircled the Poppy stand. Now, I know that there have been similar scenes like that elsewhere in the UK. I believe Charing Cross was another one where a similar situation happened. And when he tried to get away, when he tried to pack up the stall, as he does at 3:30 every day when he's here at Waverley, he was pushed. His foot was stood on and he hurt his foot, and then he was punched twice as he bent down to get items of the stall to begin packing up. And of the hundreds and hundreds of people who had flocked to Waverley Station for that protest, well, it wasn't the protesters that helped him out of the situation, it was 3 of the staff here at Waverley Station.
Well, I have to say, Tony, that is an absolutely disgusting story. Has it, to your knowledge, affected in any way what the Royal British Legion will be doing over the course of the next few days?
I certainly don't believe so. Now, we've only really heard today from a few different parties, such as British Transport Police, who were quick to put out a protest today to say that this, of course, is under investigation and that they have been combing over footage and they're working extremely closely with ScotRail. Then we also heard from Poppy Scotland, who It protected the right to peaceful protest. However, obviously the welfare of the volunteers, quite an important word, that volunteers, he certainly wasn't paid to be in that situation. He was there in his own free time. Well, they've said that he is resting up well at home, and he would like to extend his thanks again to those railway staff. Now, of course, Armistice Day here at the weekend, we have heard from the Scottish Palestinian Solidarity Campaign. I was at a protest there in Glasgow on Saturday, and they made it quite clear that they would be back at it again this weekend. No clue what it will be like here in Edinburgh, but certainly the noises from the leader there were that they are intending to occupy somewhere they shouldn't.
Nothing stops them. Tony Maguire, thank you for that report. And folks, I can't give you a better reason why this should not go ahead than what happened to that 78-year-old parachute regiment veteran. Now, let's talk about the NatWest Bank, shall we? No, nothing to do with me, nothing to do with debanking. This is to do with you. Yes, because you helped bail these people out to the tune of £45 billion when, through their greed and stupidity, they otherwise would have gone bust. Well, thank goodness for Transparency Task Force. And I'm joined by Andy Agalandashu, Chair of the Secretariat Committee for the All-Parliamentary Group on Personal Banking and Fairer Financial Services, and Mark Bishop, who's also part of a secretariat for that committee. Guys, you've uncovered something that I think is amazing. Andy, start off just by telling us how much of a mess our money is in with the investment in NatWest Bank.
Nigel, you're absolutely right to bring your viewers' attention to this matter, because all the evidence shows that the NatWest Group is displaying all the characteristics of an organisation that is misbehaving. I'm speaking with you tonight in our capacity as founders of the Transparency Task Force, the campaign group, and we have access, Nigel, to data, hard, reliable data that shows that NatWest has actually been fined over £700 million since the global financial crisis. And because the Great British public are shareholders in that organisation, it is once again the Great British public that is quite literally bailing out the bank. And that's wrong, Nigel, and everybody should be rather livid about it, frankly.
Yeah, and we still own nearly 40% of the bank, and the share price is now down just below £1.90. We bought those shares at £5. We're supposed to sell that near 40% by 2026. I just can't see us getting our money back ever, can you?
Well, the exit is due to happen in 2026. The big question is this: will the Financial Conduct Authority start regulating NatWest properly so that it does behave properly? Nigel, it may or may not astound you to know that since the global financial crisis, since then, the NatWest Bank has been guilty of anti-money laundering deficiencies, foreign exchange market manipulation, a very, very, very long list of...
It's very, very poor indeed. It's very poor indeed.
It's very clear that the FCA needs to raise its game, quite frankly.
Well, absolutely. And, you know, we're in the cart here, Mark Bishop, for tens of billions of pounds. We complain about, you know, spending £8 million a day on migrant hotels, but this is real money. Just tell our viewers, Mark Bishop, since we took the bank over and since they've cost us all this money, how much have its bosses earned?
Well, I don't have a cumulative figure, but I think that your good friend Alison Rose could probably give you an idea of what the current package is. And actually, it's really important to mention her because, you know, there's been a lot of reporting recently about what's happened to Fred the Shred's pension. It's gone up and up. When the bank was rescued in 2008, his pension was a mere £342,000 a year. Now it's reckoned to be nudging up towards £550,000 a year. And back in that era, you know, politicians and regulators shrugged their shoulders and said, terribly sorry, we don't have any of the powers that we need to make this man liable for his own recklessness in the way that he ran this bank.
Unbelievable. Gentlemen, all I can say is thank you. We need to uncover the truth. This is a huge amount of our money. Our taxes went up directly to bail out banks and people like this. And you keep uncovering the truth. And we on GB News will keep making sure the public, a big public, get to hear it. And thank you. I mean, it's just astonishing, isn't it? You know, 11 million quid is what Alison Rose could walk away with. And the other bosses of the bank, since it was privatised, have walked away with 55 million quid. You couldn't make it up. Right, in a minute, let's have a look and see what Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, has done. A deal with Albania to send 36,000 people that cross the Mediterranean. Is it a winner? Is it different to the Rwanda deal? And will it fly with the ECHR?
Coming up on GBN tonight with me, Mark Dolan. After a poppy-selling war veteran was allegedly assaulted by pro-Palestinian supporters, is it time for police to get tough by banning marches on Remembrance Weekend? Plus the latest on Royal Snubgate, as Angela Levin reveals the truth about Harry and Meghan's claim that they were never invited to the King's birthday celebrations. Join me for 2 hours of feisty debate, 9 to 11 on GB News.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
More energy this time!
Welcome to the dinosaur hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie. Second best. You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows,
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. Join me, Mark Dolan, Fridays and Saturdays from 9, Sundays from 10. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So 145,000 people have landed across the Mediterranean on Italy's shores this year. Many of them, of course, coming through that little island of Lampedusa. That's up from 88,000 last year. That poses Giorgia Meloni a huge problem. She was elected saying, look, you know, we can deal with this problem. Now, she's met with Edi Rami, who is the Prime Minister of Albania, and done a deal with Albania. And the deal is that they can send 3,000 people a month, that's 36,000 people a year, across to Albania, where they will be processed. And if they're granted asylum, they can come to Italy. If they're not, they'll be sent back to their home countries. All of which, I'm guessing, is music to the ears of Paolo Borchia, Italian MEP for the Lega Party, who joins me live down the line from Vicenza. And this is what the Lega have been campaigning for, isn't it?
Yes, that's what we were voted by our electors. I think that after a long period with huge pressures on the Mediterranean side, finally we were able to find a common sense solution in order to externalize procedures for asylum seekers, in order to know in a clear way who is seeking for better wages or maybe for better protection from European member states' welfare systems, and people that are running out from conflicts, from wars. So
yeah, I mean, I get
this is a good idea, but
Paolo, I get the logic. I get the logic of what you're saying, but here's the problem: 3,000 a month, when over 10,000 a month are arriving. I mean, you're only... Oh, he's gone. There we are. The wonders of modern science, eh? Yeah. Now, I'm also joined by Professor Leila Simona Tolani, Director of the Centre for Italian Politics at King's College London. Let's begin, Leila, with the politics of this. That's the Lega, who've always had a very tough position on this. The Brothers of Italy have sprung up with arguably an even tougher position on this. Meloni becomes the Prime Minister, promising she'll do something. So, in a sense, she had to do something.
Well, definitely she had to do something because the situation was out of control, as you said at the beginning. If you have doubled the number of migrants that were shoring on the Italian coastline, is actually a problem, especially if you are very much against migration. So, in a way, this deal, which is actually second to another deal they've already done with Tunisia, and it didn't end up particularly well, is like the admission of a failure that Italy is unable at the moment to deal with this number of migrants. Yes,
it's dealing with the symptom, not the cause.
It's dealing, yes.
And I do fully understand that. However, the numbers are, I mean, they're reasonably impressive. I mean, we had a Rwanda deal, or we still do, and we're waiting for a Supreme Court judgment. But, that was nothing like 3,000 people a month. We were talking hundreds. But there's a very big difference here, isn't there, in a sense?
There are some differences. I'm totally sure that Ms. Meloni, she took some lead from the UK, because she obviously has been talking with your Prime Minister about it. But there are many differences. The most important one is that basically the refugees or wannabe refugees that will arrive in Albania, then they'll have their application processed there, but then they will be allowed to come back to the EU, to Italy, to stay as refugees if their application is accepted. Whereas in the case of Rwanda, it is different, because the refugees who are not allowed to enter and to ask for the refugee status in the UK will have to go back to go to Rwanda and stay in Rwanda, will never be accepted by the UK.
That's why the government have had such problems.
Absolutely.
With the European Court of Human Rights and indeed the British courts interpreting it. So I wonder, with this deal, where the Italian Navy, or an equivalent, will pick up boats in the Mediterranean, in Italian waters, take them straight to a port in Albania, because that's the plan.
That's the plan.
As it's been hatched, processing there, and then if they pass, they come to Italy. If they don't, they get sent back to their home countries. But there's a problem with that if they haven't got any ID, because they've thrown it in the Mediterranean. Where do you send them?
Well, there are many problems with the deal. This is one of the problems. Repatriation is one of the problems. So they are sent to a new centre. It's called the reception centre, more or less always in Albania, because they made a deal for two centres. Yep. One for the processing of the applications, and another one to reception for those who are waiting to be repatriated. The problem is, according to the deal, this is under the Italian law. And that's very difficult and debatable, because we have extraterritoriality for the Italian law, but the refugee law is not Italian. It's actually European law.
You've got so you're going to have to fight You may not have as big a problem with the European Court of Human Rights as we had, but you're going to have a huge problem with the EU's common asylum policy.
Absolutely, because this is a common policy and there is extraterritoriality for the EU law. It doesn't exist, or at least it's not been. It might exist, but it has to be negotiated with the EU, and this has not been done because this deal is apparently just landed on the desks of the European Commission.
What's interesting about this is Meloni was elected and, she's going to be so tough, she's going to fight Brussels. But actually, she's been pretty emollient towards Brussels thus far. Is this the moment which she stands and fights?
Well, that's very much to be seen. As we are very much at the beginning of this process. Yeah. So, as I said, the EU had just received the memorandum. No one has seen the memorandum. No one has... I've been looking for it online, but I couldn't find it. Then there is the issue that basically this is also a way to take away the attention of the Italian public from the current budgetary law, which is incredibly more austere and actually more Draghi-like than anyone was expecting. and so...
Well, she's turned out to be a very much more moderate Prime Minister in many ways.
In many ways. I think this is not necessarily a bad thing, but definitely for her electorates is not exactly what they were expecting.
No, I think a lot of her electors thought she'd be a lot tougher and a lot more difficult. And have her poll ratings suffered as a result of all of this?
Not really, not at the moment. But the budgetary law is a turning point, I would say. And it really depends on how it goes. Of course, it's gone through a mechanism, which is it was immediately given the confidence vote by the Parliament. But still, the application has to happen. So we will see what happens.
I have to say, Leila, you've got a great job. Being a professor of Italian politics, it's the most extraordinary subject. Thank you for joining us on the programme.
Thanks.
I sat and worked with Italian MEPs for almost 21 years. I have to tell you, it was virtually impossible. It makes British politics look really very straightforward and very easy, especially on days like today where we've had the King's speech. And I bet that one man that absolutely loved the pomp and ceremony, well, he's sitting right next to me now, and it's Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg. I bet you loved it, didn't you?
Oh, it's great. It's part of our history, and the Lord Chancellor walked backwards. So we reinstituted a tradition, and you can't any longer say that the Tories don't succeed in turning the clock. We've done it.
Well, that would particularly please you. And I have to say, Jacob, the thing that really got me, and I was talking to the audience about it, you know, this life means life. Every single Prime Minister since the abolition of the death penalty says life means life. They don't mean it, do they?
It's never been implemented, no. And it should be implemented, but it will only be implemented if you're very narrow on who you apply it to. Because actually, as 40, 50 years go by and you've got an 80-year-old in prison, most people think that for most crimes that person should be released. But if they've done something really savage, like Myra Hindley, they should not be released. And of course, she wasn't released.
She wasn't. No,
so
she wasn't.
Bearing in mind,
you're right.
that sometimes life...
But then she was put in prison at the time the death penalty was still around.
But by the end of the death penalty, not many people were executed each year. So
but all these promises, maybe the weather would be more promising.
Hello again, very good evening to you. It's Alex Merkel here with your latest GB News weather forecast. Whilst tonight we'll get off to a bit of a chilly start, wind and rain is going to push its way in later, lifting our temperatures. It's in association with a frontal system that's pushing its way in from the Atlantic. This will sweep its way eastwards as we go into Wednesday. But ahead of that, we have clear skies across many places, and under these clear skies, temperatures taking a bit of a dip during the start of the night, and some mist and fog as possible before the wind and rain pushes its way in as we go through the night. That wind and rain is going to lift our temperatures, so by the time many of us wake up on Wednesday morning, it shouldn't be too chilly. As we go through Wednesday itself, then a wet and windy start across many places. The rain could be pretty heavy, particularly across parts of Scotland, northwest England, but it pushes through fairly quickly, except in the east-southeast. Here the rain is going to linger well into the afternoon. Behind it, something dry and brighter, but also heavy showers likely across western parts of Scotland and Northern Ireland. In the north, temperatures staying in single figures for some, milder further south, highs of around 13 or 14 Celsius. Plenty of showers to come as we go through Thursday, particularly in western places where you're exposed to the blustery winds. Also some heavy showers in the south and southeast possible. More eastern, northeastern parts likely to stay dry with some decent bright sunny weather here. Further showers to come as we go through Friday, but they are going to gradually ease, with Saturday at the moment looking largely dry. Bye-bye.
Who is it? We're here for the show.
this time!
Welcome to the Dinosaur Hour. I was married to a therapist.
And you survived?
I thought we were getting Hugh Laurie.
Second best.
You interviewed Saddam Hussein. What's that like?
I was terrified. I'm playing strip poker with these three.
Oh!
No, thank you.
My CDs need to be put in alphabetical order.
Are you going to be problematic again?
The Dinosaur Hour. Sundays at 9 on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you.